Have you ever wondered how one individual can change the course of history? Nelson Mandela, with his courage and tireless dedication to justice, is a living example of this. If you want to be inspired and learn more about her incredible journey, join us by subscribing now to watch our video. Discover how Mandela's struggle continues to inspire and impact those privileged to know him. Join us on this journey of discovery and inspiration. Sign up now and don't miss this unique opportunity to connect with a story of true heroism and resilience. Nelson Mandela's journey began among the rolling hills of South Africa's Eastern Cape, where he spent his days herding sheep and diving into the crystal-clear waters of local streams. In his autobiography, Mandela shares his memories of a free childhood, where he ran through the fields and swam in the streams, under the protective gaze of his mother and the vast starry sky. However, it was only throughout his life that Mandela realized that the freedom he so valued was just an illusion. Her given name, Halisada, meant to mark on the branches of a tree, reflecting the deep connection to her roots. At school, he refused to adopt an imposed Christian name and asserted his African identity, a decision that stayed with him throughout his life. Despite the challenges posed by the apartheid regime, Mandela had access to education at the University of Fort Hare, where his political consciousness was awakened. His refusal to accept injustice and inequality led him to become involved in student protests, marking the beginning of a life dedicated to the fight for human rights in South Africa. In his 20s, Nelson Mandela made the transition to Johannesburg, where he was first confronted with the brutality of racial discrimination, a harbinger of the apartheid that would come to dominate South African law. Initially involved in work in the mines and later as an employee in a law firm, Mandela continued his law studies and found his political calling by joining the African National Congress, ANC, the oldest black political organization in the country. It was within the ANC that Mandela realized that concerts and protests were just one aspect of the struggle of the African people. He understood that the true purpose of the ANC was to unify all African communities and build a truly inclusive nation. However, in 1948, the nationalist government, driven by white voters, came to power, clearly delineating the battle lines between supporters of equality and supporters of apartheid. Faced with increasing repression by the South African government, Nelson Mandela chose to lead the armed struggle, going underground. In his actions, he reaffirmed the view that South Africa is a nation of diverse races, where there is room for all to live in equality. However, in the face of the government's indiscriminate violence, the rhetoric of peace and non-violence seemed increasingly ineffective. Mandela became known as the Black Pimpernel due to his abilities to evade authorities. However, in 1962, he was captured and accused of leaving the country illegally, resulting in a 5-year prison sentence. Shortly afterwards, his ANC colleagues were also arrested, and they all faced the Rivonia trial, where they faced the possibility of the death penalty. Mandela's speech during the trial not only consolidated society's spirit of resistance, but also reaffirmed its unshakable values and convictions. His courage in the face of accusations and his passionate defense of the ideals of equality and justice inspired not only his fellow fighters, but also an entire nation in search of freedom and dignity. Nelson Mandela firmly expressed his fight against oppression, whether exercised by white or black domination. His ideal of a free, democratic society, where all people live together in harmony and equal opportunity, was a vision for which he was willing to fight and, if necessary, die. After his sentence to life imprisonment in 1964, Mandela was sent to Robben Island, an austere prison located on the west coast of the Cape. There, at age 45, he became prisoner number 406 of 1964. Despite harsh conditions and forced labor in a quarry, Mandela refused to be broken, maintaining his dignity and moral leadership. While Mandela was serving his sentence, his wife, Winnie, continued to be a source of inspiration for the struggle. Although the day of his liberation was far away, the fight for justice and equality continued, with leaders from all races and spheres of society uniting in search of change. Global support for the anti-apartheid cause reflected a rejection of injustice and a desire for a more just and inclusive world. This biker's friends have a clear purpose. They are committed to registering, in the broadest possible way, their vehement protest against an evil and repugnant doctrine. A doctrine that dictates that a person's legal status, political rights, economic opportunities, and social position depend solely on the color of their skin. In 1976, Soweto schoolchildren began protest marches, triggering a wave of violence that swept cities across the country. This was the beginning of the end of apartheid, although the struggle continued for more than a decade as the South African nationalist government desperately clung to power. In the late 1980s, faced with increasing international pressure, the South African government was forced to recognize the inevitable and began to dismantle apartheid. In 1990, at the age of 71, Nelson Mandela was released unconditionally. In a gesture of humility, he presented himself before the people not as a prophet, but as a simple servant, placing the remaining years of his life in the hands of the people. After leading negotiations for a new South Africa, Mandela voted in the country's first free and democratic elections, becoming the first black president. Throughout his tenure and beyond, he worked tirelessly to cement the ideals of equality and justice for which he fought, becoming universally revered as an icon of leadership and humanity. When I shared with one of my advisors my intention to retire a few months ago, he rebuked me, saying, "You're already retired, my friend. If this is true, then I must declare now that I am retiring from the very idea of retirement." Even in his retirement from retirement, Nelson Mandela continued to offer his support and generosity in countless ways. He created a lasting legacy through the Nelson Mandela Foundation, the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund, the Nelson Mandela Institute for Education and Rural Development, and the 40664 to 40,664 campaign. Mandela continued to dedicate the full force of his extraordinary talent, intellect, and heart to face the challenges not only of your own country, but of the world as a whole. Nelson Mandela, Madiba, we salute you for your tireless dedication and continued inspiration. His commitment to justice and equality left a lasting impact that will continue to reverberate through generations. Nelson Mandela's story is truly inspiring for several reasons. Firstly, Mandela dedicated his life to fighting injustice and oppression, defending human rights and equality for all South Africans, regardless of their color or ethnic origin. Furthermore, Mandela personifies resilience and unwavering determination. Even in the face of decades of imprisonment and segregation, he never abandoned his belief in justice and reconciliation. His ability to forgive those who had oppressed him is a testament to his moral greatness and humanity. Mandela's story also teaches us about the importance of compassionate and inclusive leadership. By becoming South Africa's first black president in a democratic election, he united a deeply divided country and promoted national reconciliation. Furthermore, Mandela is a global symbol of peaceful resistance and the fight for human rights. His influence extends far beyond South Africa's borders, inspiring people across the world to rise up against injustice and oppression. In short, Nelson Mandela's story reminds us of the power of courage, compassion, and perseverance in the search for a more just and equal world. His life is an inspiring example of how one individual can make a difference and change the course of history.